I did not want to be a salesperson. Like I thought that was a dirty word. Then I got into a bit more creative spaces, and I'm a very results-driven person. So I can kind of get all of that out of the role I'm in.
This is the Workin' Sports Podcast.
June 23rd, 2018, the World Surf League held the Billabong Junior Series in Ballito, South Africa. After the event, as any good social media team would do, they shared a picture of the under 18 men and women's winners, and they were holding their massive prize checks. The under 18 men's winner was for $8,000. The under 18 women's winner was for $4,000. As you can imagine, because the internet is undefeated, the blowback was fierce. The WSL had some pay equality critics leading up to this moment. But shortly after the end of the 2018 tour, so just a few months removed from that viral picture getting out there, the executive team got together, made a decision, and changed their policy. No courts, no long, drawn-out decision-making process, no negotiations, just a decision that made sense. We will pay our women equally in the jersey and in the office. All the WSL events are integrated with equal coverage to men's and women's competitions, and there are several women in the C-suite, like today's guest, Cherie Cohen, Chief Revenue Officer for the World Surf League. After 10 years at ESPN and another 6 at NBC Universal, Cherie made the move to the World Surf League, which, as you'd imagine, has a different culture, vibe, attention to sustainability and nature, while still running as a thriving business. They empower women. Their revenue numbers are through the roof. Their sponsorship numbers are through the roof. They continue to grow and expand. And you know what? It's a lot of fun to watch. Go figure. You can have both.
Both is good.
You can have a thriving culture and environment with a great vibe and still survive as a company. So let's listen to Cherie as she tells us how.
There are more than 17,000 active sports jobs on workinsports.com, but you only need one. Our iMatch tool will scan your resume and find the best matches for your skill set and expertise. Check out workinsports.com today to get started.
So great to meet you and have you on the show.
I'm honored to be here. I'm excited.
This is so much fun. As I was preparing and researching and looking into your background, there are just so many interesting directions we can go with this conversation. Things I'm passionate about, like sustainability and the environment, gender equality and wage equality, and the World Surf League. I mean, there's so much we can dig into. So let's just start a little bit at the beginning, and then we'll get into some of these bigger topics. Your first job out of graduating from Rutgers was at Televest Entertainment. And I read in one of your bios that you referred to it as, quote, the foundation of your career. Why? Why was that the foundation of your career? What makes you reflect on it in that manner? Why was that so important to you?
Oh, well, so I'm going to go back to where it all began. And I'm just going to start by saying I got to work for industry titans, like number one. And it was at a golden age of media and media buying and planning in New York City, a little Mad Men, but maybe later.
Yeah.
And I worked for Reno Scanzoni, Donna Salvatore, and Erwin Gottlieb, all folks who went on to run big businesses and really taught me what I know about media and media planning. Secondly, I did meet my husband there. And so I'll never be able to forget the foundation that laid.
Right. Yep. That's a pretty good one.
I still have friends in the business from that experience, one of which is the EVP of marketing and media at Paramount Pictures all these years later. So many of my friends doing interesting things in the media landscape.
Side note, Rutgers was one of my absolute top choices. So I would have been there from 92 to 96. I wanted to go there really bad. And I was from a small town and I got a little bit intimidated by the city of New Brunswick, which is funny now looking back because I've lived nothing but in cities. But when I was 17, I was like, this is a little too intense for me. So I didn't end up going. Now I regret it. We would have known each other.
I know. It seems a little daunting. I didn't want to go to Rutgers. I wanted to go to UCLA, but I stayed close to home to make sure I could manage and get it all done.
Well, yeah. So looking through your background and resume, there's a different theme of sales that runs through the arc of your career. in television and events and multimedia and sponsorships. Not only that, but in Court TV, ESPN, NBC Universal, and now the World Surf League. How did you discover this to be a fit for you and something you truly enjoy and get happiness out of it?
I think being in the media and marketing landscape for the last, I guess, 20 something years has offered me so many new opportunities, as well as the ability to continually learn. I need to be sort of intellectually engaged to stay motivated and excited and fulfilled like most people. I've found that in this industry. I've also found the ability to grow and develop my career, and I feel like I'm able to be as equally creative as I am analytical in this industry and in all the roles I've really had over the years. I just think that I've focused on trying to advance either my skill set, knowledge base, or network in each move, and really kind of diversify myself a bit.
Yeah.
So that I'm always learning.
Yeah. I mean, that lifelong curiosity is so important. Was there something about sales that resonated with you early? I find a lot of people, it's like, it's split down the middle. Some are like, I love it. And others are like, yep, wasn't for me. But what resonated with you in that world?
Well, this might speak to some of the younger community out there. Like, I did not want to be a salesperson. Like, I thought that was a dirty word. I started off in a more analytical position, media buying and planning, negotiating, and really understanding the like mechanics and business aspects of media. Then I got into a bit more creative spaces when I was at Paramount Pictures in their marketing department, and I never thought I wanted to be in sales. But then I did realize later on in my career that in a sales role, I get to work with all of the best marketers in the world. I have learned so much from the folks I get to sit across the desk from. And to me, I think if I approach my business and partnerships like I'm solving their business problems, I feel really good about myself, and I also can be more effective. So
I love that.
Sales is a dirty word, kind of, in some parts, especially in the creative world. However, I think, I see myself as a conduit. I'm good at interpreting information, analyzing things, and, maybe connecting the dots. And I am innately a people person. I love people. I watch nothing but autobiographies. I'm interested in people. And so maybe that's a bit of it too. But I think for anybody who's afraid of public speaking, because I once was, everyone is, and everyone has a bit of stage fright. I think just the more you practice, the better you get. And the more comfortable you get. And time does give you a little bit more confidence, right? Like
it does.
we're
Repetition.
older now.
Yeah. Hey, I'm the one with the gray hair, so you look fine.
You are.
You look great. So you have one of the coolest offices I've ever seen. I've been doing this show for a really long time, and you have surfboards in the background and guitars and jerseys. And anybody watching on our YouTube channel, you're getting a tour right now. You can see it. It's really cool. And I'm really intrigued by, after almost 10 years at ESPN, another 6 at NBC Universal, you make this big career move, Chief Revenue Officer. That's big in title, but then it's also a big shift going from the ESPN, NBC Universal world to the world of surfing. What were those big aha moments as you made it that kind of a transition into this culture and this world? Because I have to imagine it's a lot different.
Very different. I do believe everything that I learned before coming to the World Surf League definitely set me up for success, but very different. I had worked at ESPN for 9 years, then worked at NBC Universal for 6. Really funny. I was just thinking about this the other day. My first day on the job at NBC, I was supposed to go to orientation, and they're like, "Oh, no, you're not going to orientation. You come on here, and we're going to start the work immediately."
Oh,
and there was
great.
almost,
can I learn where the bathroom is first?
there was almost no learning curve because the organizations were so similar. Steve Burke had worked at Disney, and he modeled a lot of the NBC corporation, and certainly the larger Comcast NBCU corporation, after what he learned at Disney. We did
Okay.
a thing called Symphony, which was called Synergy at Disney. And I was one of the first guys or girls at NBCU to work across the portfolio. And I had already been kind of working across the ESPN portfolio, which at the time was the biggest portfolio to sell in the market. So, and certainly for sports. So it was very easy to pick up what I had learned at ESPN and in entertainment at the agency and with Paramount and, kind of apply it to NBC, which was great. Hit the ground running,
Yeah.
had a great big team, had a lot of growth, built a lot of amazing partnerships, did some stuff with Amazon, and that still lives on in Sunday Night Football.
That's cool.
Which was amazing.
Yeah.
Executed symphony programs for the first time. And had an amazing run. But because I think I had 15 years of real big corporate experience, and I guess cross-divisional collaboration, I started to realize that the landscape of big media was changing. I obviously have a device myself. I worked with a lot of the technology partners like Google and Apple and Amazon at those places. I could see a shift in consumption, particularly with my own kids. And I started to think about what I thought the future of entertainment, sports, and media was. And I felt I maybe had seen my best days in the role I was in at NBC Universal. And instead of being in a more defensive role, I wanted to get into a position where I could be super proactive and help build something. I'm sort of a builder. And that comes with a lot of challenges at times. But that's what I was attracted to. And I had not yet had a global opportunity. And I was very interested in meeting business folks around the world. And I believed that this sport in particular had a lot of potential. Lifestyle, entertainment, and sports.
Yeah.
Definitely surfing had always been culturally influential. Look at the 60s and 90s and California culture. And as an organized entity and global league, it was early days, right, of the WSL when I joined. And so I knew that I could probably have the ability to have a pretty big impact in building and helping develop processes and formats and go-to-market strategies and just business plans, really, that ultimately, at the end of the day, would set the sport up for sustainability into the future. That's my goal. Like, leave this thing better than I found it.
When you think about the culture at World Sports Surf League as compared to others that you've worked amongst, is it a different vibe and culture? I mean, I'd imagine, but I don't want to fall prey to some cliche of surfer lifestyle. But I mean, is it a completely different work environment than what you've experienced before?
Well, let's just put it this way: if there are waves, there's a free hall pass.
Oh, that sounds good.
Except when you have a client meeting, of course. You must go to client meetings. But what I'm saying is, like, there's just...
Out of office gets creative. Like, sorry, not here.
And I mean that not to say that we're not productive. I mean that to say that, like, there is an absolute obsession with the ocean and Mother Nature and what she provides. And we are filled with lots of folks who love to surf, who love the water. And that's been really, really interesting. We're run like a family business, but we're actually, a pretty big global sport. That's also very refreshing. And everyone on board has the same sort of value system that we're operating from. I have to say, and this is going to sound corny, but it's really good vibes over here.
The environmental and nature connection, I think, is something that I'm very passionate about, and it's very important to me personally. But when I think of surfing, like if I think of that Venn diagram of surfing culture and caring for nature and environment, it's like they're a concentric circle, right? They're just kind of overlapping. And yet in our sports world, often green initiatives don't get as much buy-in as they could. I'm not saying in World Surf League, obviously it's different, but in a lot of other sports, and I've had these conversations for years, you don't always get buy-in from team ownership because those things tend to be expensive and they don't hit the bottom line, or we can't see the ROI on that kind of a green roof on our stadium or whatever it may be. And yet you have this interesting balance of your role as chief revenue officer, where you're definitely tied into the revenue and the business side and the numbers, but you also have this culture that has an expectation of nature and environment and that overlap. How do you balance those both sides of you too in this decision making? Because you're running a business, but you also have things you care about.
I have to say, I'm somebody who, and you probably heard this before, I'm somebody who really does value progress. Listen, we're one of very few sports that compete in the open ocean, and we benefit from Mother Nature. So it's our responsibility to take care of it.
Yeah.
Clearly, on a big picture as humans, it's our responsibility to take care of the planet. So it will be there for the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. There's a lot of unwinding we need to do in terms of the way that we've evolved and the sort of comforts we've gotten used to as, an industrialized society. So I think you got to be real with it. And I'm being very honest here.
Yeah.
This is more Cherie's philosophy in that there's no such thing as perfection. But what there is progress and alignment, right? So I celebrate all levels of progress, businesses that are trying to improve, people who are initiating great projects, and certainly people who are spreading the word and calling for, some sort of action change.
Yeah, I hope that more people take that initiative, because I've been to so many sporting events over my life, and you see the way the waste comes out of a lot of sports arenas and the changes that could be made that could make such a big difference. And you just hope that more people, as they become aware, start to make these priorities, because you're right, we have to pass on this world.
Well, I have to say, I am happy to say I was at the World Congress of Sports conference that SBJ holds just yesterday. And a big part of the narrative was, what are we doing, to make sure that our stadiums are green, and what are the best practices we can share? And we have to reward that instead of being very critical, lean into rewarding that conversation, narrative, and ultimately action.
I love
right? That. There are lots of examples of great stadiums that have actually erected in a really green, way, particularly if they're in Seattle and such, right? And so what can new builders learn from that? And how can we all be more responsible? And how can we teach our fans who are coming into those buildings to be more responsible as well? Because it's all connected.
I'm glad to hear it. It gives me a little bit of hope that more decision makers and power thinkers are having this front of mind. And that's where it has to start. And that's where we see a lot of the other trends that World Surf League has been on the front lines for, pay equality. Let's get into that conversation. The WSL announced prize money equality in 2018. This is at a time when a lot of other people weren't having that conversation, and you guys jumped out and did it. And I know that predates you, but when you're making decisions for yourself, coming to the organization and seeing that kind of leadership, how much does that mean to you to be a part of an organization that makes those kind of decisions?
I tell people all of the time, we pay women equally in the jersey and in the office. I'm an example of that, right? Which I'm proud and honored to be part of. I do feel I have an equal seat at the table, no matter what gender I am, right? Like I don't feel there's any bias at all. I do think that I'm really lucky we're in a sport that has a lot of equality and parity relative to performance and athletic performance and skill. It's maybe similar to some other sports out there where men and women's coverage intermix really nicely. They complement each other. They can surf the same breaks now. And we see the progression of more women entering the sport each year at higher levels. So we know women are interested in the ocean. We know they're interested in surfing. And we know there's a great big population of young girls who actually want to make a livelihood out of it. And that's what we do. We're professional surfing. I want to say thank you to all the men that paved the way. I mean, men risked their lives at Pipeline to show us it was possible. And so I'm appreciative to being part of I like to say, a dual gender sport. You know, I'm not in a women's sport. I'm in a dual gender sport, which is pretty damn cool.
Yeah,
And
it is.
I will say, can we continue to want to focus on getting more coverage, equal coverage of the sport and the athletes? That's an important thing. When I watched, sort of the NCAA Final Fours and, obviously the championship moment that everybody else watched, and I see 10 million folks tuning in versus, maybe a slightly lower number for the men, you say, well, that's what happens when you put the women in prime time.
Yeah.
On broadcast television, okay? And there's a really compelling narrative and great superstars involved. What's interesting about that to me, and this is probably a little provocative, is that when you look at the numbers, I am pretty sure that most of that 10 million or, a high concentration of that 10 million was actually men, right? And so it's, men like to watch women's sports. Women like to watch men's sports. It can be a communal experience. I think what I love about what I get to do and have gotten to do for a while now is the power of sport in society. If you think about that from just an anthropological standpoint, right? Yeah. Sport inspires people to really test the potentials, the human potential and the limits of human potential. And it inspires people and it allows them to live out their dreams, their fantasies, and their rivalries in a really beautiful way. And we found that through the pandemic, that's important to people.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me that, with the Women's World Cup in soccer a few years ago, the massive discussion was about pay equality. Just last year at the NCAA tournament, there were women that were sharing videos from their workout facilities being way substandard compared to the men. This is an ongoing issue. And yet, as I was researching for this conversation, I was so proud and happy to hear that since 2018, you guys have lived this way. And that needs to continue to gain steam. And I think there's always this interesting factor involved with it too, with coverage, when young women are almost activists for their self and advocates who are sharing that they have a lesser quality workout room or lesser quality facilities or that they're not getting paid as much. Bringing that attention matters. Bringing that attention, that notoriety and that coverage to it is how change starts to happen. And hopefully a similar situation happens in those green initiatives as well.
Yeah, I think it's important, I would say to all young women and men, of course, is to speak up and be vocal about what you want to see change. Like when we first brought women to Pipeline, which actually happened because there was a shark attack at Honoloa Bay, and we had to make a decision whether to stop the contest or move the women to Pipe. We had always wanted the women to surf Pipe the following year and had gotten the first permit to do so.
Okay.
But we did this out of necessity. And the first thing I said is we must ask them what they want and what they're ready for and capable for, and they must tell us. When you're in sport and you're risking your life and doing dangerous things, it's important for women to speak up and let the world know where their level is at and what their comfort level is. No one should ever be pushed into a situation they're not comfortable with.
Right.
But at the same time, you only know when you're ready to kind of push boundaries and break through new ground when you're organized and communicative and, can make that happen.
Let's dig into the fan base a little bit, because I find this really fascinating as well. Sports are notoriously intense. We're watching the NBA and NHL playoffs right now, and there's fans crying and screaming and yelling and people stepping on each other, Draymond Green stepping on Sabonis, and there's just this craziness to it all. And yet, I'm not trying to play into the cliche of the surfer lifestyle, but I wonder if there isn't more joy and camaraderie and celebration in the world that you work in now. Is that what you've observed, or is this just like a a completely different environment for the fans, to the athletes, to the back office, to everything.
Oh, no, I do have to say, and I've actually complained about this. This is funny. The irony of it that the athletes are so gracious and kind with each other. That I did not complain about. But
Yeah.
I think they're only just now getting a little more comfortable saying, I want to win. I am going to win.
Yeah.
I've got this. But you have to remember, too, we're in an individual sport. So you've got folks who are rooting for their heroes or their countries, not necessarily teams, right? I think people really identify with certain people and certain athletes, particularly from their countries or their backgrounds,
Yeah.
or something that resonates with them individually. And we're starting to see more personality come out, which I love. And certainly it gets exposed through docuseries like Make or Break. And so I think the more that the fan base or the new fan base can be exposed to the context of the sport, it will demystify, what professional surfing really is all about, and how athletic these athletes really are, and how much they're really tested before they are awarded something like a world title. And so I think it looks really easy when you tune in and you can see somebody ripping down a barrel and, catching an air. But I'm here to say I've surfed the wave pool. I've surfed Waikiki.
Yeah.
It is not easy to paddle out in really big conditions.
No. No. There's so much respect for what's being accomplished. I just celebrate the vibe. I think there's so much intensity everywhere. I've interviewed so many people and asked, do you ever sit back and celebrate successes, or is it always on to the next thing? And everybody's like, I'm on to the next thing. What's wrong with you? Are you crazy? And I'm like, nobody ever takes a minute, just to be where they are and whether it be present and just to accept a celebrate or victory, or I don't know. It just seems like that mentality gets lost so often. And I'm an advocate for bringing it back. Let's celebrate a little bit more.
I'm going to totally agree with that. And I think
good. Let's do it.
Maybe it's an American problem. I don't know. We are definitely on to the next thing and always accomplishing and very task oriented and always comparing ourselves on this thing. I think it is important to be in the moment, because I think that's when the magic happens. Actually, if you talk to a surfer, they'll talk about it in a very specific way where time slows down and they're the most present they've ever been. And that's sort of the thing they're chasing, the stoke.
That's when the magic happens.
Yeah. So I think you're on.
We got to capture that. Yeah. I think we're on to something here together. So I think one of the other things that really differentiates what you guys do is that it's a different fan experience. And maybe you can lean into that a little bit more, but I feel like it's almost more of a festival vibe than it is like go sit in your seat in an arena for 3 hours. How much does that play into your overall brand and the overarching opportunity to have, it just feels kind of bigger in a way, or more active or more engaging or something?
For sure. Well, first of all, I think that we're dealing with a fan base, especially those who are, really involved with coastal living, who organize their life around the beach, right? So they're invested on a level that's different than I go watch a baseball game and maybe I've played baseball sometime in the last 10 years, if not even maybe touched a baseball, right? But I also think that, one big difference is, you're either going to a stadium or a ballpark or, something more traditional with some of the other big sports here in America. When you come to see a professional surf event, you're going out to the beach. That inherently is a different experience. You've got sunshine and
much better one.
Music and all kinds of things that we've built at the beach.
I'm in my basement right now, so that sounds really nice.
And not only are you going to the beach with the World Surf League, you're going to the best beaches in the world. We're talking about Jeffreys Bay. We're talking about Chopu in Tahiti, Rio, Brazil. We bring the world to the best beaches, bar none. And we're always looking for the next best beach and next best wave. Which is very exciting for, a lot of the surfers here at the league. So inherently, we're creating beach experiences, right? We're selling endless summers. We're, creating this aspirational lifestyle of travel and culture and food. So all of those things are important to the experience that the fan has at the beach and then takes away with them. We do something here in the United States called the U.S. Open of Surfing. That's been happening in Huntington Beach for I want to say 59 years. And we don't take that for granted because it's the largest surfing event, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere, but definitely in the world at this point. You get something like 500,000 fans coming through that beach over the course of 10 days. So we're creating all kinds of experiences. And this is where I rely on my creative brand partners to bring those experiences to life.
I would imagine, since you know your target market so well, that, they're coastal living, they're into surfing, they're active. That's got to help from a marketing and sponsorship and partnership point of view as well, too, is exactly who you're able to target and go after for sponsors because you know exactly who they're going to reach.
Absolutely. And we know a lot about our audience.
Yeah.
We measure our audience relentlessly. That's a big part of what I do. I put back on my agency hat. I work with partners around the world.
That data.
Yeah, data. And we're building things like, CDPs and, first party data sources for ourselves. And I think, it's very important for us to have the data to make the decisions and also to be listening to the fan base relative to what they want. There's three main players in this sport, I like to say. There's certainly the fans who we serve, first and foremost. There's the athletes who give us their dedication and performances. And then there's Mother Nature.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good hierarchy you got there.
Yeah.
I heard you on another podcast, and you remarked that people are generally happier when they're doing something they love, which is so true, but it so often gets lost in the achievement rat race. What is it that you love the most about being a CRO? What is it about being a CRO that does feel like, I've hit my love overlap here?
I think it comes down to people. I mean, I genuinely love people. I'm a people person. I'm the happiest when I'm with people. Some people are happier alone. I respect that too. That's not me. I love teaching. I was raised by teachers. I do some work with UCLA and UC Irvine and recently University of Oregon. And so I love talking to the next generation of great minds, honestly.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think I like results. And I'm a very results-driven person. And so I can kind of get all of that out of the role I'm in. But I am interested in more broadly understanding the whole business and how it operates together, and how our teams function together, whether that's marketing, sales, finance, legal even. And I think we're doing a really good job of creating a system that operates well together here at the league.
I love that. This is such a dynamic conversation. You have the Olympics coming up in another couple of years. Well, 2024, right? In Paris? Yeah, 2024. Time is relative. I'm all confused by time anymore.
I know. We've lost a few years.
I know. It's all kind of, hey, what happened? I forget. But surfing's on the program for the 2024 Paris Olympics after a successful debut in Tokyo. How much does something like that do for awareness, the marketing of the athletes, the brand as a whole? I mean, I have to imagine that was massive coming out of Tokyo. Does that help propel World Surf League in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really bullish on the Olympics. I sold the Olympics at NBC with Dan Levinger and Paul Wilson, and I know the power of the Olympics in the United States and now around the world. Hundreds of millions of fans engage with the Olympics, right? And it creates a level of nationalism and connection to sport that, some other sport formats just can't even compare to. We did have our debut in Tokyo, which was very exciting. It was a super challenging Olympics for everybody. It was, delayed a year. There were no fans in the stadium. We were competing at a beach in Chiba that was not the best waves. It was the first time the OBC, which is the broadcast group that does the Olympics, ever filmed surf. So
Okay.
there's a lot to
That's
learn
hard.
too, because you have to call those waves on, and we're
Right.
really good at that. But not everybody knows how to do that thing. I think they learned a lot. We learned a lot, and ultimately, I think it did a great deal for the athletes who won and who participated, particularly folks like Carissa Moore, who won gold for the United States. She is now a big public figure, and folks like Kanoa Igarashi, who was on the podium for Japan, grew up in Huntington Beach, speaks 3 languages, and he is a very well-known figure in Japan at the moment. And so I'm very bullish on what the Olympics can do for our athletes, right? And
Yep.
what happens is, people all over the world will fall in love with the sport and the athletes because they're exposed to it.
100%.
And ultimately, they will come back to watch them compete on the World Surf League.
Yeah, because they feel a connection to him now. They saw him perform. They saw him win their medal, and they feel like they know him now, and that makes them come back.
And one of the challenges I think snowboarding had, because I worked with the X Games and I certainly followed Shaun White and the journey, of all the great sort of snowboarding Olympic moments. Snowboarding is less organized. So, once folks fell in love with Shaun White, he didn't have a tour that he joined immediately after so folks could continue to watch him
Yeah.
regularly. He competed in the X Games and other, competitions, international competitions, but
Yeah.
they were all disparate organizations that didn't work together to raise the profile of the sport. So a little bit more challenging, I think. But I think everybody that was on the podium and everyone who actually competed has competed in a World Surf League event, whether it's the qualifying series or the championship tour. So we're grooming the most elite athletes in the world.
That's so
The thing
fantastic.
about, and I have to continue to say this because I'm so excited.
Oh,
The thing about the games in France are that we will be competing in Tahiti, French Polynesia, which they chose
that makes a lot more sense.
waves. So while we probably will not get to benefit from like the athlete village and
Yeah,
things
yeah.
that the athletes get connected to on the ground, which is a
Is
trade-off.
a big part of it. Yeah, but
It's a trade-off. But they'll go back for the closing ceremonies and
okay.
the opening too. But people say that Chopu is the best wave in the world. It is absolutely epic condition. So we're super excited to
Yeah.
see that unfold, right? Women have only been surfing Chopu again since, a year ago.
Oh, wow.
And so it's very exciting for the women too in these conditions to show what they can do. And then we go, I think, to LA after that, which is, definitely Southern California, an easy
Can't beat that.
ground for us to generate more fandom, and then out to Australia. So I feel like we've got 3 games.
It's set up for, surfing
On a
really
runway.
well. I have to ask, because you mentioned a little bit earlier about the docuseries. I adore sports docuseries. It doesn't even have to be a sports that I'm into, but it gets back to that same thing, that humanity of it all. And I think we get more enticed when we see the people, the background of them, how they operate, how they prepare. Like, you just find yourself drawn to them. Is that one of the biggest opportunities in that future, in that runway of continuing to build the surfing brand and to make sure that gets that same high level of awareness to it?
Absolutely. It comes down to storytelling, right? And I think there is a lot of opportunity to continue to tell stories about these amazing athletes and these amazing places, these amazing cultures.
Yeah.
And we've probably only just, started getting started in this area, but it's very exciting. And I think the more it dimensionalizes these people,
Yes.
the more folks fall in love with them. But it also dimensionalizes the sport, some of the dynamics that exist within the sport, and I think it's all good. And we're really excited about the relationship we have with Box to Box, who did the series for Drive to Survive,
Yeah.
and also Apple TV, of course, and
Mhm.
others. So I've had so many folks in my life who say, they've seen the series and they're now watching the tour, and
Yeah.
they're sending me
It's a
articles.
direct translate. I watched the full swing, and I had drifted away from golf for a while. I watched the full swing Netflix series and was like, I want to watch golf every weekend now. Like it's that one-to-one connection that once you get invested in it, you want to see it through, and that's such a great opportunity.
Absolutely.
We'll finish up with this. We briefly mentioned it earlier, but I have talked to people on this show for years about the opportunities that come from working in sales, and for a lot of people, that does feel like oh no, I'm not doing that. Like it's a dirty word, like you said. But to me, it has one of the highest ceilings in any part of our industry. Everybody that I worked with in the media world, my bosses were all sales connected, you know? What do you think, if you look back over your own personal career or those other people that you've worked with, what do you think are those key components or those traits or those strategies or those skills that make somebody really cut out for sales and great and can do them really well?
I tell my own kids, I'm like, 2 skills you really need in life, and one of which you actually don't have to have, you can pay for, is salesmanship and some sort of legal comprehension.
Yeah, exactly.
And, if you have both and can have both at a high level, even better. But so salesmanship, again, it's about translating and communicating and delivering results and solutions. I think all of those skills are really important. But I will say one of the most important skills in sales is listening. And a lot of folks who are people, if you will, have a hard time doing that. And it's really important to know when to lead with your own ego or your own ears, and which to, and how to balance that, right? And I think ultimately the folks who succeed in sales are the ones that realize that they are there in service of their partners and their clients.
Active listening is a skill that everybody should have. I mean, we talk to our kids about it all the time too. It's like, it's great for sales, like you said, but that's just that's a life skill right there that not enough people master, is that just ability to be a good listener.
Well, we can take that full circle because you talked about being in the moment and being present. And when time stands still and you can actually connect.
Yes.
You have to learn to do that to be a good active listener. You got to shut the device down. You got to stop the racing mind. You got to listen and be in the moment and learn to communicate effectively with other humans, essentially.
Yeah. You can't be thinking about what you're going to say next. You got to be actively listening. So important. Well, I listened to every word you said. This was brilliant. I learned a ton. So thank you so much, Cherie, for coming on the show. I really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It was a great time.
Thank you to Cherie for coming on the show. I love the part of our conversation that was about the culture and the vibe and the work environment. I think so much of us are focused on work-life balance and feeling connected to purpose and what your work means to you. And I love the fact that she's got that balance. She can still achieve as a chief revenue officer and build that business, but they can also take surf breaks and they can also go hit the beach and they can also do things that help build their culture and align with the vibe of the World Surf League. Thanks for listening, everybody. Please continue to listen and to rate and to review and subscribe. It helps us grow. Thank you. See you all on Monday.